Every morning of my life, for 53 years, I have gotten up at 3 o'clock in the dark and gone down to feed the mother. That is what bakers call it, the sourdough starter, the living leaven, the mother. Ours was begun by my grandmother in 1941, a little crock of flour and water that she kept alive and warm and fed every single day. And that my father fed after her, and that I have fed every day of my working life, so that the bread that comes out of our ovens this morning is made from a living thing nearly a century old, a thread of the same life my grandmother started with her own hands before the war. You keep a mother alive by feeding it, faithfully, every day, whether you feel like it or not, whether anyone thanks you or not, in the cold and the dark before the rest of the world wakes up. That is the whole secret of it. Faithfulness no one sees. And I want you to hold on to that idea of the faithful, unthanked feeding in the dark, because it is the center of everything I have to tell you. And it belongs, it turns out, more to the one who betrayed me than to me. My name is Emil Roth. I am 71 years old, and I am the baker at Roth's, a family bakery on the main street of a town in Wisconsin, the third Roth to stand at these ovens. I want to tell this slow, the way you let dough rise. Because the thing that nearly took the bakery my family built over 3 generations was not the big chains. And it was not my age. And it was not the changing tastes of a world that buys its bread in plastic bags. It was my own sister, the one person left in my life who shared my blood. And the bitterest part is that to understand why she did it, I had to finally see something about her that I had been too comfortable to see for 50 years. Let me knead the foundation first. Roth's has been on this corner since my grandfather built it. My grandmother started the mother. My grandfather built the brick oven that is still the heart of the place. My father ran it after them, and I grew up in flour, learning the bread at my father's elbow before I could see over the bench. And when my father passed, the bakery came to my sister Greta and me, the two of us, to run together. And we did, for 50 years. There is a thing that happens in a bakery at 4 in the morning that almost nobody alive ever sees. The town is black and asleep, and the ovens are roaring, and the whole place is warm and gold and smells like the inside of a good memory. And the bread is rising on the bench in long, pale rows, and you are alone with it. The only soul awake for a mile, doing the oldest work there is, turning grain and water and fire and time into the thing that has kept people alive since before there were towns. I have done that almost every morning of my life, and it never once stopped feeling like a kind of prayer. And then the sun comes up, and the door opens, and the town comes in. The early ones first, the farmers and the night shift folks, and the old widowers who come as much for a face as for a roll. And you hand them something warm that you made with your own hands in the dark, and you have fed them, in the way that matters most and the way that matters least, both at once. Roth's married this town and buried it, and got it through every hard winter for 90 years. We gave bread to families who could not pay and never wrote it down. The bakery was not a business. It was the warm, lit heart of a cold little town. And that heart had been beating 3 generations on the faithful work of Roth's in the dark. I thought I knew whose work. That is the whole of my blindness, right there. And I have to be honest about how we ran it, because that honesty is the whole key. I was the baker. I was the one with the flour on my arms, up at 3, working the dough, pulling the loaves, the one whose hands were in the bread. Greta ran everything else. The books, the orders, the suppliers, the bills, the payroll, the 100 invisible things that keep a business breathing. I made the bread. Greta made the bakery work. And the town, over 50 years, came to love Roth's. And they came to love, in particular, Emil the baker. The man in the white apron who hands you a warm loaf and asks after your mother. The newspaper did a story once, on our 90th anniversary, with my picture, me at the oven, the 3rd generation baker, and I do not believe Greta's name was in it more than once. In passing. I never thought about that. That is the thing I have to confess. For 50 years, I stood in the warm front of the house, being loved by the town, the face of Roths, while my sister sat in the back office in the cold light of the books, keeping the whole thing alive, feeding the business the way I fed the mother, faithfully. In a kind of dark and unthanked, I did not see it. I told myself we were partners, equal, and in my own heart we were. I loved her, but I never once stopped to notice that the world gave me the apron and the photograph and the warm loaf in my hands, and gave her a column of figures and a back room, and that a person can stand that for a year or 10 years. But 50 is a long time to feed something in the dark, while the world claps for the one out front. Now let me tell you about Greta, and about what she did. And I am going to try to tell it true, which means telling my part of it too. Greta is 67, 4 years younger than me. Our father, in the way of his generation, had named me the head of the bakery when he passed, the oldest, the son, the baker, though he meant us to share it. And I think that small old wound, my name first on a paper that was supposed to be both of ours, never fully closed in her. And I never thought to tend it, because it did not hurt me, so I assumed it did not hurt anyone. I trusted Greta completely, more than completely. I handed her the entire business side of my life, and I never looked at it again, not once in 50 years. We had been a team since we were children. I can still see her at 7 years old, standing on a stool beside me at this same bench, both of us white to the elbows in our grandmother's flour, fighting over who got to punch down the dough. When our parents died within a year of each other and left us the bakery and not much else, it was Greta and me against the world. 2 kids in their 30s, suddenly holding a business and a mortgage and a town's expectations. And we held it, together, through lean years that would have closed a place run by one person alone. She was brilliant at her half of it, truly, sharper with a column of figures than I will ever be with a loaf. And there were 100 times over the years when her quiet work in that back office was the only reason we made payroll, the only reason the doors stayed open. And I knew it, in a general way, the way you know the furnace is keeping you warm without ever going down to look at it. There was a moment, years ago, I remember it now, when a supplier praised me at a chamber dinner for building Roths into what it was. And I saw Greta's face go still for just a second before she smiled. And I felt a small wrongness, and I let it pass, because it was easier to let it pass, because the praise was warm and I did not want to give it up. That was the warning. One of 50 years of small warnings I was too comfortable to read. A man does not get robbed by his sister out of nowhere. He gets robbed at the end of 1,000 mornings he did not turn around. I signed whatever she put in front of me. When she said, "Sign here, Emil," I signed, without reading, because she was my sister, and reading it would have felt like an insult, like telling Greta I did not trust her with the very thing I had given her my whole life to hold. "I make the bread," I used to say. "You make the sense." I thought I was honoring her. I see now that I was also disappearing her, handing her all the weight and keeping all the light. And somewhere in the last few years, the weight she had carried unseen for half a century, and the old wound of the name, and a hardness I had never let myself notice growing in her, turned into a decision. Greta decided that the bakery was not really mine and hers. It was hers, that she had built it, kept it alive, done the real work, while I played baker for the cameras. And that what she was about to do was not stealing. It was only taking, at last, what had always really been hers. What she did, I would learn, was 2 things, done patiently over years, by a woman who held every record and every password and every signature. The first was the simplest. She had been skimming, for years, quietly. Money that the bakery earned had been routed where it should not go, into accounts that were hers, a steady, invisible drawer, so slow and so well hidden inside books only she ever read, that I never saw the bakery was earning far more than the bakery seemed to keep. We were doing fine, I thought. We were, in truth, doing well, very well. And the difference between fine and well had been going into Greta's pocket for years. But the second thing was the one meant to end it all. Greta had quietly arranged to sell. Not the business, exactly, the building, because the real treasure of Roth's, it turned out, was never the bread. It was the corner. Our brick building on the main street that my grandfather built sat on the most valuable lot in a downtown that developers had started circling, and Greta had been talking, secretly, to a developer who wanted that corner, who would tear down the bakery and put up something that paid better than bread ever could. And she had structured it, with documents I had signed without reading, so that when the sale went through, the windfall would be hers, and I would be left a retired old baker with a thank you and a fraction, watching them knock down my grandfather's oven. And she had laid the ground for it, the way the careful ones do. She had begun, in the last couple of years, to tell me the bakery was struggling, that the numbers were bad, that bread did not pay anymore, that I was a sentimental old man who could not see that our time was passing, that maybe it was kinder to sell while the building was worth something than to watch the bakery die slow. She said it gently, sadly, the loving sister easing the old fool toward the inevitable. And the town heard a version of it too, that poor Emil could not keep up, that Roth's was probably on its last legs. She was building the story that would make the sale look like mercy instead of theft, and she was casting me, in that story, as the doddering relic who had to be managed. And it was working, because it is the easiest story in the world to sell about an old man, and because she had a lifetime of standing to sell it from. Who would doubt her? She was the one with the books, the sensible one, the sister who had loyally propped up her sentimental brother for 50 years. Of course she would know if the bakery was failing. Of course she would be the one to make the hard call her dreamer of a brother could not. She had even started, gently, to manage me in front of others, finishing my sentences, correcting my numbers, exchanging the little look with the staff that says, "Bear with him." Each small thing was nothing on its own. Together they were a portrait, painted patiently over 2 years, of a man no longer fit to decide, and she was the artist, and I was the last to see the painting, because it was a painting of me and I was standing inside it. The cruelest forgeries she made were not the documents, they were the small daily ones, the ones that turned 50 years of partnership into a story where she was the keeper and I was the burden. So that when the bakery was finally sold out from under me, the whole town would nod and say, "Well, it was time. Poor Emil. Good thing Greta was there to handle it." And for a while, God help me, I believed her. Because I had spent 50 years trusting her with exactly these things and had no habit of doubting her. And because I am old and I was tired and the books were hers and she said the books were bad, I came close to agreeing to sell. It is a strange grief to be told the thing you have given your whole life to is dying. I started to look at the bakery differently in those weeks, the way you look at someone you have been told is sick. I would stand at the bench at 4 in the morning and think, maybe this is the last of it. Maybe Greta is right, and I am just a stubborn old man keeping a corpse warm because I cannot bear to let it go cold. I started to feel like a relic, exactly as she had painted me. A man whose time and trade had passed him by. Too sentimental to read the plain, bad numbers his clear-eyed sister kept laying in front of him. I began, in my own head, to make peace with selling, to tell myself that a building full of money was a kinder legacy than a bakery that failed slow, that I owed it to Greta not to drag us both down with my stubbornness. I had a pen in my hand more than once over papers she had ready. And the terrible thing is that every doubt she planted grew in the exact soil where my trust in her had always grown. So that the more I loved and trusted my sister, the more readily I believed the lie she was telling me about my own life's work. That is how the people closest to you can do what no stranger ever could. They do not have to break down your door. You hand them the key every morning, smiling, for 50 years. I had nearly let myself be talked into believing that the bakery my family had run for 3 generations was failing, that I was a fool to hold on, that my own sister, who surely loved me, would not steer me wrong about our own life's work. I was a week or 2, maybe, from signing the thing that would have ended Roth's forever and handed Greta the proceeds, thanking her the whole way for her hard-headed business sense in saving me from myself. What stopped me was Lena. Lena has worked the counter at Roth's for 30 years, and she loves the place, the way only someone who chose it can. And she had been watching Greta, and something in her would not lie down. She came to me one evening after closing, when Greta had gone, and she was wringing her apron. And she said, "Emil, I have rung up this register for 30 years, and I know what this bakery takes in. I count it, and I am telling you, this place is not failing. We are busier than we have been in years. I do not know what those books your sister keeps are saying, but they are not saying the truth, because the truth goes through my hands at that register every single day. And the truth is, we are doing fine." And then she said the thing that woke me all the way up. She said, "Emil, why does a failing bakery have a developer's man coming to the back door twice a month?" So I stopped being a tired old man who signs what he is handed, and I went back to being a baker, which is a person who knows, more than anyone, that you cannot fake the truth of a living thing. You can lie about a loaf on paper, but you cannot lie to the oven. The bread either rises or it does not. And I went, for the first time in 50 years, to look at the books myself. Except I did not go to Greta's books, because Greta's books were the lie. I took Lena's register counts, the real money, the truth that went through honest hands every day. And I took them to an accountant 2 towns over who had never met my sister. And I asked her to find where the truth and the books parted ways. It did not take her long. The bakery was not failing. The bakery was thriving, had been thriving for years. And the gap between what Lena's register took in and what Greta's books reported was a steady river of money that had been flowing, quietly, for years, into accounts that belonged to my sister. The accountant laid it out for me on her conference table, gently, the way you tell a man bad news about his own family. She had the register tapes on one side and Greta's official books on the other, and the two told 2 different stories. And the distance between the stories was the theft. Plain as the gap between a true loaf and a lie about a loaf. It had been going on, she figured, for the better part of 8 years, growing bolder as it went unnoticed, which is the way of it. Because the first time a person reaches into the till and nothing happens, the second time is easier. And by the end, Greta had stopped being careful, because 50 years of my never looking had taught her that I never would. The number, all told, was large enough that the accountant set down her pen and looked at me and asked, quietly, if I was sure I wanted to know the rest. I said I did, and she showed me the rest. The developer, the secret structuring of the sale. The documents I had signed blind, stacked up like bricks in a wall built to put me outside it. I had walked into that office thinking maybe there had been a mistake, an error, something I could blame on confusion. I walked out knowing my sister had been robbing me, with both hands, on purpose, for the better part of a decade, while telling me to my face that our life's work was dying. And then the accountant found the rest, the structure of the sale, the developer, the careful arrangement of the documents I had signed blind, the way the whole thing had been built so that the corner my grandfather laid would be sold out from under the bakery, and the money would land in Greta's hands, while I was eased out the door as the poor old baker who could not cope. I sat with that a long time. And the strange thing, the thing that surprised me, was that under the hurt, what I felt most was a terrible, late, useless understanding. Because I could not pretend, looking at it, that I had not handed her the knife myself. 50 years I had let her feed the bakery in the dark, while I took the loaf and the applause. I had not stolen the light from her on purpose, but I had taken it, every day, and never once turned to share it. I do not say that to excuse her. What she did was theft, real and planned, and there were other doors than robbing your own brother. There is always the door of simply saying the true thing out loud. Emil, I am tired of being invisible. But I could not look at the whole of it and find myself entirely innocent either. And that changed how I decided to do what I had to do. There was a flaw in her plan, and it was a deep one. And it was the one thing she could not forge or restructure her way around. My grandfather, when he built that building, had left it, by a term that came down through my father's will, as a thing that belonged to the bakery and to both of his grandchildren together, in a way that could not be sold by one of us alone. I had never paid that term any attention in my life, because I had never had any reason to. It was just old language in old papers. The kind a man like me signs and files and forgets. But my grandfather, who had lived through hard times and watched families lose everything to a single bad signature, had been a careful man, and he had written the corner down into a knot that took 2 wraths to untie, on purpose, so that no one wrath in a weak moment or a bad mood or a fit of greed could ever sell the family's ground out from under the family. He had reached forward almost 100 years and protected me from my own sister, and from my own blind trust with a sentence in a will. And neither Greta nor I had ever known it mattered until the day it was the only thing that did. She had built her entire tower on documents I signed without reading, certain I would never look. And she had been right that I would never look. But it did not save her, because the ground the tower stood on was never hers to move. The deed required us both, truly both, and I was not signing. Greta had built her whole scheme on documents I had signed without reading, but the foundation under all of it, the deed to the corner itself, required us both, truly both, and no signature, she had walked past me in a stack, could override what my grandfather had locked into the ground beneath the oven. She had been so sure I would never look, never check, never doubt her, that she had built a tower on a foundation that was never hers to move. The moment I understood the deed, the sale was dead, because she could not sell what we owned together without me, and I was not selling. So the developer's deal collapsed, quietly, the way these things do when the ground gives out under them. And then there was the money she had taken, and there was my sister, and there was the hardest decision of my life, harder than any I made with flour. I asked Greta to come to the bakery one evening after we closed, when the ovens were cooling and the front was dark, and it was just the 2 of us in the warm bread smell where we had spent our whole lives. I asked the accountant to be there, and Lena, and I had all of it. The real numbers, the skimming, the dead deal, the deed she had forgotten. And I did not start with the books or the theft. I started with the mother. I had thought hard about where to do it. I could have done it in a lawyer's office, cold, with the documents on a polished table, and made it a transaction. I did not want that. I wanted to do it in the one place that held the whole of us, the bakery our grandparents built, where Greta and I had fought over dough on a stool as children and stood beside each other through 50 years of dawns. Because whatever she had done, what was between us had been made in that room, and I felt that it ought to end, or change, in that room too. So we sat among the cooling ovens, the long benches wiped down for the night, the last warmth still coming off the brick, the smell of the day's bread still in the air, the accountant with her folder, and Lena standing quiet by the counter she had rung for 30 years. And my sister across from me, where 1,000 loaves had cooled between us. And I let the warmth and the memory of the place sit on both of us a while before I said a word. Then I started with the mother, with the faithful feeding in the dark, because before I showed her what she had done, I needed her to know that I had finally seen what she had done for 50 years. The unthanked part, the part I owed her an apology for, because I was not going to indict her without first confessing myself. I told her I had fed that starter every morning for 53 years in the cold and the dark before the town woke up, and that I had always thought of that as my faithfulness, my quiet, unthanked work. And then I told her that I had finally understood, too late, that she had been doing the very same thing the whole time, feeding the bakery in her own dark back room, faithfully, for 50 years, while the town clapped for the man out front, and that I had let her, and never once turned around to share the light, and that I was sorry for it, more sorry than I knew how to say. And I watched my sister's face, and I will tell you what happened because it was not what I expected. She did not soften. She got angry. The anger of 50 years, and it came pouring out, all of it. How she had kept the place alive, how no one ever saw her, how father put my name first, how the town loved Emil the baker and never knew Greta even existed, how she had earned every cent and more. And it was true, a great deal of it was true, and I let her say all of it. And then, when she was spent, I said the one thing that I think finally reached the bottom of her, the thing that broke her in a way no accusation could have. I told her that she was right, that the world had never seen her, that the town and our father had wronged her in exactly the way she said, but that I never had. That I had loved her my whole life as my equal and my partner. That I had never once in 50 years thought of her as less than me, or competed with her, or wanted her in the dark. That I had simply, stupidly, failed to notice the dark she was in, and that the war she had been fighting against me all these years, the war that had finally made her rob me, was a war against a brother who had never once been her enemy. I told her she had burned down a real love over a slight that, between the two of us, had only ever lived in her own head. And that was when she broke. Because she could have stood being caught. What she could not stand, I saw it land on her like a wall coming down, was the understanding that the brother she had spent decades resenting as her rival had never been her rival at all, had loved her the whole time, and that she had aimed 50 years of accumulated fury at the one person in her life who had always been on her side. She had nursed her grievance against the world by making me the face of it, because I was the easy face, the one out front. And now she had to sit in our parents' bakery and understand that she had robbed and very nearly ruined the one man who had never done her wrong. It is one thing to be a thief. It is another to learn that you stole from the only person who loved you fairly. I watched that knowledge take her apart, and there was no triumph in it for me, none, only a grief as old as our childhood. And here is the part I am, in the end, at peace with. I had her cold. The skimming was theft, plain, years of it. A crime with a number and a name, and the lawyer told me I could send my sister to prison and strip her of every cent and be entirely within my rights. And there was an hour, the hour I first understood the whole of it, when the hurt was fresh enough that I wanted to. I did not do it. I removed her from the bakery and from the books entirely, and I had the accountant trace and recover what could be recovered, which was most of it, returned to where it belonged. But I did not send my sister to prison, and I did not take the case to the town, and I did not strip her bare, because she is the last of my blood, and our parents are in the ground, and I am 71 years old, and I have learned one thing at the oven above all others, which is that a sour leaven sours the whole loaf. If I had let what Greta did turn me bitter, if I had spent my last years feeding a hatred of my own sister the way I feed the mother, faithfully. Every morning, it would have soured everything I have left. Every loaf, every dawn. I was not going to do that. I had the bakery back. I had the truth. I did not need to destroy the broken woman who had finally understood what she had done. A baker, of all people, knows you do not cure a sourness by adding more of it. Greta and I are not what we were. I do not know if we ever will be. But she is not in a cell, and we are not strangers. And on the hard days, I remind myself that the woman who robbed me was also the girl who stood on a stool beside me at this bench when we were small. Both of us white to the elbows in our grandmother's flour, and that whatever rose up between us, that was real too, and came first. She came in a few months after, on a quiet weekday morning, and stood in the doorway a long moment, and then she crossed to the back and, without a word, fed the mother, the way our grandmother did, and our father, and I have, every day for 53 years. She did not look at me while she did it, and I did not stop her, and neither of us said anything. And when she was done, she left. I do not know everything that was in it, but I know that the starter our grandmother began was fed that morning by both her grandchildren, and that there are things older and deeper than what we do to each other, and that a person who feeds the mother, even once, even silently, is saying something a long, sour war could not quite kill. I have decided to take it as the beginning of an apology. At my age, you take what rises. The bakery is still here. The mother is alive. I fed her this morning, the way I have for 53 years and the way somebody will after me, because I have taken on a young baker named Sam who loves the bread the way I do, and I am teaching him the whole of it. And this time, I promise you, when the newspaper comes, there will be more than one name in the story. Lena still runs the counter. The corner my grandfather laid is not a developer's parking structure. It is a bakery, warm and full of light at 5 in the morning, feeding a town that does not know how close it came to losing its bread. They thought the man out front, the baker the town loved, would be the easy one to ease aside, the sentimental old fool who never looked at the books. They forgot that a baker spends his whole life learning the one thing that cannot be faked. The bread either rises or it does not. The truth is in the living thing, not in the ledger. And the truth was that the bakery was alive and well, and that the foundation my grandfather laid was deeper than any lie built on top of it. And that some things, once they have risen, cannot be talked back down into the dark. I still get up at 3, I still feed the mother, and I have made my peace. In the long, faithful dark before the town wakes, with the hardest loaf I ever had to make rise, which was forgiveness for a sister, and a little late for myself.